Hello and welcome back. I'm here with another video, and in this one we're going to continue our Unity C# series and we're going to take a look at for loops. Let's dive right in. Up until now we've accessed individual elements within our collections, such as lists and arrays, accessing them directly through the subscript operator. But what do we need to do if we want to go through a collection type element by element? In programming, this is called iteration, and C# offers us a couple of alternatives to enable us to do this easily. You can kind of think of an iteration statement a bit like a method, where it contains a block of code, but instead of being just run through once, it will go through over and over and over again until a certain condition is met. So the iteration statement we're going to look specifically at today is the for loop. Let's have a look and see how we go about creating it. So let's have a look at the structure of the for loop. First of all, you have the keyword for, which starts the statement, followed by a pair of parentheses. Inside the parentheses, you have the initializer, the condition, and the iterator. The loop starts with the initializer expression, which is a local variable created to keep track of how many times the loop is executed. This is usually set to 0 because collection types are 0 indexed. Next, the condition expression is checked, and if true, proceeds to the iterator. The iterator expression is used to either increase or decrease the initializer, meaning that the next time the loop evaluates its condition, the initializer will be different. So what we'll do now, we'll go to my scripts folder, right click and go create new C# script, and we'll call this the for loop. We'll go ahead and hit enter and bring it up in Visual Studio. So for simplicity, I'm just going to remove the start and update functions. I'm going to create a list, and we're going to use this list to give our for loop something to iterate through. So let's create a generic list. Let's do a list of ints, and we'll call this list of ints. It'll be a new list of ints. It goes off with our brackets and a semicolon. I'm going to make this public so we can see it in the inspector, and on an empty game object in the scene, I'm just going to drop it in like so, and you can see here we've got our list of ints. And let's say we've got 10 items in our list, and it goes from 1 to 10. So we've got 10 items in our list that go from 0 to 9. So that's set up our list. That gives us something to iterate through in our for loop. So then we're going to use our start method, and here we're going to create our first for loop. So the for loop is most commonly used when a block of code needs to be executed a certain amount of times before the program continues. And as we saw in the syntax explanation, our for loop is going to need 3 expressions, each with a specific function to perform before the loop executes. And because for loops keep track of the current iteration, they're best suited for lists and arrays. So let's go ahead and write our for loop, and for that we're going to put in our keyword for, and then open our parentheses, and then inside our parentheses, don't forget we need our initializer, our condition, and our iterator. So for our initializer, we're going to use an int, and the normal convention here is to use the letter I, and we're going to say that it equals 0. So that is going to be our initializer. We're setting up our I int variable to be 0, and then you're going to need a semicolon, and then we have our condition, which is written as, well, I is less than our list of ints dot count, and this is just going to return the length of our list. So if we've got 10 items in our list, this will be 10, so it's going to keep looping for our for loop whilst I is less than 10. And then after we have our condition, we need our iterator, so we need to increment our local variable of I. We're going to say I plus plus, and then we're going to finish it off with bracket and then hit return and add in our curly braces, and then some code is going to go in here. So what's happening here is that this block of code is going to keep running all the time while I is less than the length of our list, and each time we go around our code block, I is incremented by 1 until it meets this condition, and then it stops, and then everything below our block of code here would run. So now we have this loop set up, which is going to run whilst I is less than the list of our ints. We can do something with the code block in between the curly braces. So let's go ahead and let's add 10 to each of our ints inside our list. So to do that, we would write list of ints. We can use our subscript operator. And we can use our local variable here of I and put it in between our square brackets here. But all we're doing is referencing whatever position we are in our loop. So we're accessing the element at index I, which currently it would be 0. I'm going to say plus equals 100. We're going to add 100 to each of our elements within our array. So when we go through here, I is going to be 0. So list of ints 0, which is our first element in our list. We're going to add 100 to it, and then it's going to loop around again. I becomes 1. So we're accessing the first element within our list, and we're going to add 100 to that. So all we're going to be doing is jumping through this list and adding 100 to each of them. And then when we run this, you'll see here that instantly 100 is added to each of our elements in our list. Then you can also use our conditional statements that we learned a few weeks ago. So we could say if list of ints I equals, let's say, 5, we could do some other code once we found a specific value within our list. So we could say debug.log found 5. And then when this runs, you'll see here it's found 5 because it's gone through our list using I, starts at 0, and then it keeps going around in our loop until it eventually finds the element that has the value of 5 inside. So let's take a look at another quick example. I'm going to go ahead and create another list, make it public again, just for ease. This time we're going to do a list of strings, and we'll call this list Avengers list. It's going to be a new list of strings. I'm going to initialize this one in code instead of in the inspector. So I'm going to put in my curly braces just below my list, and then I'm going to start typing some strings. First of all, you need your speech marks, and let's type some Avengers. Is Iron Man all one word? I don't know. I chose Avengers because I've been playing it on the PS4. Coincidentally, very good. But anyway, once we've got that list initialized, go ahead and finish it off with a semicolon. And then we can do another for loop. Let's remove this one. So we'll start off with our for keyword, open our brackets. We're going to put in our initializer. We're going to use a local variable of I again. And you can also use, if you had nested for loops, you could use other letters such as J, K, and L. We're going to give this a value of 0 and semicolon. And then we want our condition. We're going to say, well, I is less than avengerslist.count. We're going to keep going whilst I is less than the length of our list. It's a capital C for count, and then semicolon, and then we want to add our iterator, the I++, then drop a line and add in our curly braces. So we could, just as like we did before, we could use a conditional statement and check the strings to see if it meets a certain value, or we could just go through and print each and every single one off as we went through the list. So we could say debug.log, open up brackets here, go ahead and put in a $, and then speech marks. You can say Avenger at index, and then we add in our curly braces. I'm going to say I is called, and open up some more curly braces, and we can then say Avengers list, open up our subscript operator, and put in our I. We'll finish off with a semicolon. And all we're doing here is we're going to, for every time our loop goes round, we're going to say what position we are in our loop, which is going to go back to our list. So if we're at position 0, we're at index 0 in our list. We're going to try and get that element, and then is called, and then we're going to access our list and then display whichever Avenger is at that current position. Let's go back to our editor, here our console, and we'll go ahead and click play. And there you go, we can see Avenger at index 0 is called Iron Man, Avenger at index 1 is called Captain America, and so on and so on. So there we are, that's our first look at iterative statements. We've taken a look at the for loop, and next week we'll take a look at the for each loop. So later on in the week I've got another video coming out showcasing something I've been working on, just a small thing in VR as a little experience, which is quite cool. And then moving on later on in the month, we're going to start our Make a Game in VR series, where we start from scratch and make a cool, awesome game. So stay tuned, stay subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.